O.J. Simpson. His name probably brings up memories of both football greatness and the infamous murder trial. But there's more to the story, especially when it comes to his relationship with the NFL. For years, the league turned a blind eye to things they didn't want to face, like his domestic violence history, because he was their golden boy. But after the trial, they distanced themselves from him in ways you might not expect. So, what's the NFL really hiding about O.J. Simpson? In this video, we'll dive into 10 things that might surprise you about the league's response to his shocking fall from grace. Stick around, this isn't the story you think you know. O.J. Simpson's involvement in the 1994 murders. Once a celebrated NFL superstar, O.J. Simpson found his world turned upside down in the summer of 1994 when he became the prime suspect in the brutal murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ronald Goldman. At the height of his career, Simpson was an NFL icon, one of the greatest running backs of all time, a beloved figure in American sports. However, by June 12, 1994, his legacy would be forever tainted by the grisly events that transpired that night. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were found murdered outside Nicole's condominium in Brentwood, Los Angeles. Nicole had been stabbed multiple times, with deep cuts and lacerations, and Goldman was similarly killed. It was a crime that shocked the nation, and soon after, O.J. Simpson became the prime suspect. His violent history with Nicole was well documented, and their tumultuous relationship, including accusations of abuse, suggested a potential motive for the killings. Simpson was not only estranged from his wife, but also had a history of confrontational behavior. On June 17, 1994, Simpson, fearing arrest, famously fled from the police in a white Ford Bronco driven by his friend Al Cowlings. The slow-speed chase became one of the most watched television events in American history, with millions tuning in to see if Simpson would surrender or be apprehended. That same night, the media frenzy surrounding the murders and Simpson's involvement began to take on a life of its own, eclipsing even the most intense NFL games. Simpson's involvement in the murders was heavily debated. He was charged with 2 counts of murder, and his subsequent trial, the trial of the century, captivated the nation. The prosecution presented evidence, including DNA analysis, that seemingly pointed to Simpson's guilt. However, Simpson's defense team, led by high-profile attorneys like Johnny Cochran and Robert Shapiro, argued that the evidence had been mishandled or tampered with. Simpson's infamous line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," became a rallying cry for his defense, as a glove found at the crime scene appeared too small for Simpson's hand. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Simpson was acquitted in 1995, a verdict that stunned many and sparked widespread debates about race, celebrity, and justice in America. While some believed in his innocence, others were convinced of his guilt. After the trial, Goldman's father filed a civil suit against Simpson. In 1997, the jury unanimously found Simpson responsible for the deaths of Goldman and Brown. The Goldman family was awarded damages totaling $34 million, which is about $64 million today. But as of 2024, they have received a small portion of that. Now, this is where the NFL's response to the Simpsons case is noteworthy. Though many in the NFL's leadership and among Simpson's former teammates wanted to stand by him, the league distanced itself from Simpson during the trial. The NFL, which had once embraced Simpson as one of its most iconic players, found itself in a difficult position. There was a public perception that supporting Simpson during such a high-profile trial could damage the league's reputation, especially given the severe nature of the crime and the violence associated with Simpson's past. While some players, coaches, and former teammates privately supported Simpson, the NFL was cautious. The league didn't want to be seen as endorsing or excusing Simpson's actions, particularly when public opinion turned against him. This distancing was a critical moment in Simpson's fall from grace. Despite his athletic achievements and celebrity status, the NFL knew that continuing to support him publicly would risk alienating fans, sponsors, and the media. Simpson's case revealed the complex intersection between celebrity, sports, and criminal justice, and highlighted how even the most powerful figures in sports can be swiftly abandoned when their actions bring scandal to the forefront. The NFL's reaction to Simpson's trial, balancing personal loyalties with professional responsibility, was emblematic of the broader public response to the case. Although many wanted to believe in Simpson's innocence, the brutality of the murders and the evidence against him were too overwhelming for the league to publicly back him during the trial, signaling a crucial shift in the way the public viewed him and his relationship with the NFL. And while the the NFL distanced itself from Simpson to protect its reputation, there was another reason why the organization didn't want to associate itself with someone who was acquitted of the murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ronald Goldman. If he was found not guilty, why did the NFL cut ties with him? The NFL ignored his history of domestic violence. O.J. Simpson's history of domestic violence was well known long before the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. In fact, Simpson's violent behavior towards his ex-wife was documented, and there were several instances in which the NFL organization failed to address or act on these issues, primarily because of his star power and popularity. Simpson's relationship with Nicole was marked by repeated incidents of abuse. According to psychologist Lenore E. Walker, the Simpson-Brown marriage was a textbook example of domestic abuse. In fact, Brown wrote that Simpson had beaten her in public, during sex, and even in front of family and friends. Nicole had reported that Simpson had physically abused her multiple times, with incidents as early as the 1970s, shortly after they married. She described an incident in which Simpson broke her arm during a fight. To prevent him from being arrested, she told emergency room staff that she had fallen off her bike. Brown wrote that she felt conflicted about notifying police of the abuse because she was financially dependent on Simpson. Of the 62 incidents of abuse, the police were notified 8 times, and Simpson was arrested once. According to police records and testimonies from those close to the couple, Simpson often became violent and aggressive, particularly during moments of jealousy or anger. In 1989, Simpson was arrested for felony spousal abuse after an altercation with Nicole. As a result, he was charged with spousal abuse, pleaded no contest, and was sentenced to 120 hours community service, 2 years probation, and a $700 fine. Nicole later claimed that Simpson had threatened to kill her during one of their arguments. Despite these serious allegations, Simpson remained a prominent figure in the NFL. He was not only one of the league's most famous running backs, but also a media darling, frequently appearing in commercials and television shows. His fame and popularity seemed to overshadow his violent behavior, and many in the league, including team executives, coaches, and players, turned a blind eye to his domestic abuse. The NFL, at the time, was notorious for overlooking player misconduct, particularly when it came to star players. Simpson's status as a Hall of Fame athlete and his endorsement deals made him a valuable asset to the league. The NFL was more concerned with protecting its image and maintaining its lucrative relationship with a high-profile figure than addressing the very real concerns surrounding Simpson's domestic violence history. This behavior wasn't unique to Simpson. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the NFL had a long-standing pattern of ignoring or downplaying instances of player violence, especially when it came to domestic abuse. Players who were known to be violent were often given a pass as long as their on-field performance was exceptional. Simpson's case was a glaring example of this systemic failure. His abuse of Nicole was often dismissed as part of his personal life, and the league was hesitant to intervene, viewing his off-field actions as secondary to his athletic achievements. It wasn't until the murder trial in 1994 that the NFL was forced to reckon with Simpson's history of violence. However, by then, it was too late. The league had ignored the warning signs for years, allowing Simpson's toxic behavior to persist unchecked. The NFL's failure to take action or hold Simpson accountable during his playing days not only tarnished its reputation, but also highlighted the league's broader indifference to issues of domestic violence. In the aftermath of Simpson's acquittal, the NFL distanced itself from him, but the damage had already been done. By allowing Simpson's violent history to remain unaddressed for so long, the league failed its players, its fans, and, most importantly, the victims of domestic abuse. The NFL's decision to prioritize Simpson's star power over the well-being of his ex-wife and the countless other women affected by his violence is a stark example of how the league's priorities were deeply flawed. While it has been established that the NFL was secretly hoping Simpson's trial doesn't affect their megastar, the organization had no option but to disown their golden boy after the trial of the century. And there is one particular reason why they did that. The NFL is ashamed of Simpson. You see, Simpson's fall from grace was swift and devastating, not just for him personally, but also for the organizations that once embraced him, including the NFL and the Buffalo Bills. Despite Simpson's status as one of the greatest players in NFL history, both the league and his former team distanced themselves from him after the 1994 murder trial and his subsequent conviction for armed robbery in 2008. This disavowal was a direct response to the public outrage and the shame that his actions brought to the NFL, an organization that had long been tied to Simpson's star power and media presence. The NFL, historically known for its marketing of its players as role models, found itself in an uncomfortable position when when Simpson was arrested for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. While Simpson was acquitted of the murders, the stigma surrounding his name and the trial was impossible for the NFL to ignore. In the years following the trial, the league made a conscious decision to distance itself from Simpson. As of recent years, there has been no official statement from the NFL or the Buffalo Bills following Simpson's death, despite his extraordinary career with the team. Simpson was a Hall of Fame running back who set numerous records with the Bills and became a household name. However, following his conviction for armed robbery in 2008 and his notorious history of domestic violence and criminal behavior, the NFL and the Bills remained largely silent on the matter of Simpson's death. A clear example of the NFL's attempts to erase Simpson from its legacy came in 2018, when Simpson was notably omitted from the NFL's 100th anniversary celebrations. The NFL's official social media accounts and website, which routinely honor past legends of the game, made no mention of Simpson during this milestone event. The omission was a striking visual reminder of how much the league had distanced itself from the once celebrated star. When Simpson was arrested in 1994, NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue said, "It's not the NFL's problem or football's problem, it's O.J. Simpson's problem." This statement, which was a rare admission of shame by the NFL, made it clear that Simpson's past was now an uncomfortable chapter in the league's history. Similarly, the Buffalo Bills, who had once proudly celebrated Simpson's record-breaking performances, also seemed reluctant to acknowledge him in recent years. Despite Simpson's significant contributions to the team's success in the 1970s, including his 2,000-yard rushing season in 1973, the Bills have not publicly commemorated Simpson's achievements since his legal troubles began. The team's silence after his death on April 10, 2024, just showed how much they have distanced themselves from someone who was arguably the franchise's best and most notorious player. Also, the Daily Mail asked the NFL if they plan on releasing a statement about Simpson. The league's spokesman said that they do not plan on doing so. The NFL's reluctance to embrace Simpson in the years after his legal troubles speaks volumes about the organization's embarrassment and the complicated legacy of a player whose athletic achievements were overshadowed by his criminal behavior. While Simpson was once a central figure in the NFL's marketing machine, his fall from grace has led to a public shunning by the league and his former team, a quiet admission of the profound shame his actions brought to the sport. Though what Simpson did made it difficult for the NFL to even release a statement after his death, it is worth noting that the NFL had cut all ties with him a long time ago. NFL's uncomfortable relationship with Simpson's post-trial. After O.J. Simpson's acquittal in 1995, the NFL was stuck in a really tough spot. His trial had become a media circus, with TV ratings going through the roof as his personal drama unfolded on national television. So much so that an estimated 150 million people watched the live verdict of the Simpson trial on October 3, 1995. The trial also drew a huge audience for the low-speed chase that preceded it, which was watched by an estimated 95 million people. The NFL, however, wasn't thrilled about being dragged into the mess. League execs were clearly frustrated with how the media turned Simpson's case into a cash cow, using the trial to boost their TRP, while the NFL tried to figure out how to distance itself from the chaos. Simpson wasn't just a star player, he had close ties to some of the NFL's top brass. Many high-level executives, including those at the league's headquarters, had known Simpson personally for years. He wasn't just a former player, he was someone who'd rubbed elbows with key figures in the organization. But as the trial spiraled, these personal connections didn't do much to save him. The NFL knew that continuing to publicly associate with him was a huge risk. His legal troubles were dominating the headlines, and the league quickly realized that any connection to him could cause long-term damage to its reputation. The issue was the media frenzy. While Simpson's trial made for high drama and even higher ratings, it became a massive headache for the NFL. The league was trying to focus on the game, but the spotlight kept shifting to Simpson. Even though he had ties to so many influential people in the NFL, the league had to be smart about its image. Simpson might have been a star on the field, but his off-field life was quickly overshadowing his football legacy. The NFL knew they had to distance themselves or risk losing sponsors, fans, and credibility. By the time Simpson was convicted in 2008 for armed robbery, the NFL had already made its move. They weren't about to celebrate or publicly support someone with such a complicated and toxic legacy. The league stopped mentioning him in any official NFL events, and his name was carefully kept out of the spotlight. Even after his release from prison in 2017, the NFL continued to avoid any public association with him. In the end, the NFL's decision to keep its distance from Simpson was about protecting its brand. Even with his Hall of Fame credentials, the league had no choice but to move on. Simpson's personal life had become a liability, and the NFL had to make it clear that no matter how close the ties, the league couldn't afford to keep dragging his controversial past into the spotlight. spotlight. Another thing that the NFL has hid from their fans is how O.J. Simpson's case made them make drastic changes to things that they thought were perfect. Simpson's unspoken influence on NFL players' behavior. O.J. Simpson's infamous trial in the 1990s marked a turning point for the NFL, forcing the league to confront uncomfortable questions about player behavior and how it should address off-field conduct. Simpson's legal battles, particularly the highly publicized murder trial, became a wake-up call for the NFL. The league, once seen as a haven for athletes with questionable personal histories, had to reconsider how it handled incidents involving players' legal troubles. Simpson's case, along with several others in the years that followed, forced the NFL to rethink its approach to player behavior and its role in holding athletes accountable. One of the major policy changes after Simpson's case was the implementation of a more structured personal conduct policy, which the NFL introduced in 2007. This policy provided a clear framework for how players would be disciplined for off-field behavior, from criminal charges to actions that brought negative attention to the league. The policy was a direct response to the league's growing concerns over the rising number of high-profile criminal cases involving its players. The need to re-evaluate players' behavior policies was important since Simpson's case wasn't an isolated incident. In 2012, Jovan Belcher, a linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs, tragically murdered his girlfriend and then took his own life in front of team officials. This shocking event raised serious questions about the NFL's responsibility to address player behavior, particularly related to domestic violence and mental health. The league responded by implementing stricter guidelines and creating programs aimed at supporting players who might be struggling with personal issues. Another notorious case that pushed the NFL to re-evaluate its conduct policies was that of Darrell Henley, a cornerback for the Los Angeles Rams. Henley was sentenced to 41 years in prison for trafficking cocaine and attempting to murder a judge and witness. His case highlighted the need for the NFL to act more decisively in disciplining players involved in serious criminal activities. Similarly, Greg Hardy's 2014 domestic violence case underscored the growing pressure on the NFL to take a stronger stance on abuse. Hardy, who had been accused of assaulting his ex-girlfriend, was placed on the NFL's exempt list, meaning he could draw his salary but could not participate in team activities. Though Hardy was eventually convicted, his case further highlighted how the NFL was increasingly willing to take action in response to players' criminal behavior, even if it meant severing ties with talented athletes. These incidents, along with Simpson's troubled legacy, were key in pushing the NFL to adopt its current policies. The personal conduct policy continues to evolve, but the goal remains clear: to ensure that the NFL stands for more than just athletic prowess and that players are held accountable for their actions both on and off the field. Simpson's case, along with the cases of Belcher, Henley, and Hardy, changed the league's approach to player behavior and marked a shift toward more proactive measures in maintaining the NFL's public image. But there was another problematic perspective of Simpson that the NFL hid from fans because it affected their reputation at the time: his racist remarks about the NFL and black players. Though O.J. Simpson was one of the NFL's most famous and successful players, there was a dark side to his public persona that the league would rather have kept hidden. One of the most controversial statements Simpson made was when he infamously declared, "I'm not black, I'm O.J." Though the timeline of when the comment was made is unclear, rapper Jay-Z attributed this statement to him in his 2017 Grammy-nominated song, The Story of O.J. In the context of a sports world dominated by African-American athletes, Simpson's words were interpreted by some as an attempt to distance himself from the struggles of black athletes in a racially divided America. His comment was also seen as an attempt to assert his individuality and to separate himself from the civil rights struggles that many of his peers were actively engaged in. Simpson's views on race became even more apparent during his post-football career, particularly when he spoke publicly about his relationship with the NFL and its predominantly black player base. In several interviews, he made remarks that many perceived as derogatory toward black athletes, suggesting that they were more prone to trouble than their white counterparts. Simpson also expressed disdain for the idea of black players banding together to fight for social justice, often distancing himself from their causes. This alienated many fans and athletes who felt that Simpson, due to his success, had disconnected himself from the racial struggles that were so prevalent within the NFL. The NFL, in its attempt to protect its image, largely swept these comments under the rug. Simpson's statements were a liability for the league, especially at a time when the NFL was trying to promote inclusivity and highlight the contributions of black athletes. And just when you think that the NFL was not going to budge in its stance on never mentioning O.J. Simpson and acknowledging him, they did something super controversial. NFL paid him tribute during Super Bowl 2020. In a move that stunned many, the NFL included O.J. Simpson in its Super Bowl 2020 tribute, sparking a wave of criticism on social media. During the broadcast, Simpson's image appeared briefly alongside other NFL legends in a montage celebrating former players. This surprising inclusion of a figure with such a controversial history drew backlash from fans and commentators alike, who were quick to question the league's decision to honor Simpson after years of distancing itself from him. Simpson, who had remained relatively out of the public eye since his release from prison in 2017 after serving time for kidnapping and armed robbery, seemed like an odd choice for the tribute. The NFL's decision to include him in this tribute was seen by many as a contradiction, especially given his criminal history and the NFL's past efforts to distance itself from him. Social media exploded with criticism, with many expressing outrage that the league would acknowledge Simpson while continuing to avoid mentioning more recent figures like Colin Kaepernick, who had been blackballed from the league after his protests against racial inequality in 2016. His protests received renewed attention in 2020 amid the George Floyd protests against police brutality and racism, but he remains unsigned by any professional football team. Critics pointed out the glaring inconsistency in how the NFL handled Simpson's legacy compared to Kaepernick. While Simpson was celebrated during the Super Bowl tribute despite his legal troubles and infamous history, Kaepernick, whose protest was aimed at raising awareness about racial injustice, had not played in the NFL since 2016. For many, this represented a deeper issue about the NFL's priorities when it comes to its players, particularly in how it handled controversial individuals based on public perception and popularity, rather than the content of their actions. And though the NFL paid some sort of tribute to Simpson, the league tried everything to distance itself from their controversial star. Simpson's post-prison NFL relationship. After serving time for armed robbery and kidnapping in 2008, O.J. Simpson, ever the competitor, reportedly sought a return to the NFL. However, despite his high-profile past and the NFL's attempts to move past his criminal history, the league wasn't eager to bring him back. Following his release from prison in 2017, Simpson reportedly expressed interest in making a comeback to professional football, even though he was well past his prime. At the time of his release, he was 70 years old, too old for a return to the playing field. However, Simpson's desire to re-enter the NFL was more focused on potential work within the league in some capacity, possibly as a coach or an analyst. Despite these intentions, the NFL was quick to shut down any notion of Simpson returning, even in a non-playing role. The league had no interest in publicly reinstating someone with Simpson's controversial history. His involvement in the 1994 murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, followed by his 2008 conviction for armed robbery, meant that Simpson's reputation was, for the most part, irreparably damaged in the eyes of the league and its fans. Simpson's post-prison requests to re-enter the NFL were met with resistance at every turn. League officials were keen to avoid the backlash and media frenzy that would inevitably surround any attempt to involve him in the NFL again. Simpson may have hoped for a second chance, but the NFL's priority was protecting its public image, which had taken enough of a hit over the years due to his criminal actions. Ultimately, Simpson's post-prison NFL relationship was defined not by a return, but by the league's firm refusal to engage with him again, despite his efforts to reach out. And despite severing all ties with the disgraced Simpson, the NFL doesn't want you to know there was one thing they quietly continued doing until his passing. He was getting a healthy NFL pension. Remember, I mentioned that the Goldman family was awarded damages totaling $34 million after O.J. Simpson was found civilly liable for the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. After the verdict, the Goldman family aggressively pursued Simpson's assets, attempting to claim whatever they could from his wealth. Unfortunately for them, Simpson had already spent much of his liquid assets on assembling his dream team of lawyers during his criminal trial. As a result, he only managed to pay back $500,000 of the $34 million owed. But here's where things get a bit tricky for the NFL. While Simpson might have lost much of his personal wealth, he still had a valuable safety net, his NFL pension. In his later years, Simpson was receiving $42,000 annually in Social Security benefits. On top of that, he had an NFL pension worth $5 million, which provided him with annual payments between $125,000 and $300,000. The Goldman family could not claim these funds due to state law protecting Simpson's pension, making it one of the few assets he could rely on. Simpson was one of the first athletes to sign multi-million-dollar endorsement deals. After being drafted by the Buffalo Bills in 1968, he demanded the largest salary in NFL history at the time, $680,000 per year. He also had lucrative deals with companies like Hertz, Tree Sweet, Napa Naturals, Schick Razors, and Wilson Athletic Gear. This financial success meant Simpson died a millionaire despite his legal troubles. After turning 55, Simpson became eligible for his NFL pension, and it's widely believed that he delayed receiving payments until he was 65 to maximize his benefits. When he finally began collecting in 2012, he started receiving $10,565 per month. Simpson spent his later years in a 5,000-square-foot mansion in Las Vegas, where he lived with a friend in a gated golf course community, playing golf, watching sports, and posting on Twitter. And every month, he received that sizable pension check from the NFL. This is a fact the league would likely prefer to keep under wraps. Despite the NFL's efforts to distance itself from O.J. Simpson, his actions continued to grab headlines, including one highly controversial project that shocked fans and critics alike: the If I Did It book. O.J. Simpson's 2007 book, If I Did It: Confessions of the Killer, became one of the most controversial and widely criticized projects of his post-trial life. The book, which was originally intended as a hypothetical account of how Simpson would have committed the murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman, sparked massive public outrage. In the book, Simpson detailed a chilling step-by-step account of the murders, even though he had been acquitted in his criminal trial years earlier. The book's release was met with immediate backlash from the public, media, and victims' families. Many believed that it was nothing more than a confession masked as fiction. The Goldman family in particular expressed their disgust, viewing it as a way for Simpson to profit from the deaths of their loved ones. In response to the backlash, the book was pulled from shelves, and its publication rights were later given to the Goldman family, who were awarded the royalties in an effort to satisfy the civil judgment against Simpson. The NFL, which had worked hard to distance itself from Simpson over the years, condemned the book in no uncertain terms. League officials made it clear that Simpson's actions, particularly this book, were in direct opposition to the values they wanted to uphold. Although Simpson had already been removed from any official NFL roles, the league's condemnation was a public statement that they would not tolerate any further association with him, especially when it involved profiting from such a heinous crime. Ultimately, If I Did It not only reaffirmed Simpson's status as an outcast in the public eye, but it also caused a rift between him and the NFL, cementing their decision to sever all ties with the former star for good. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, check out the suggested content on your screen by clicking one of the cards displayed.